I want to tell you just a little bit why I am so excited that we're doing this training. And that is that because it leapfrogs over our usual process and gets you to a place where you're training leaders, and then those leaders are coming back to apply to be on different positions. So instead of hoping you can find somebody and look, it proactively gives you a chance to bring people with disabilities together, give them the tools that they need in order to serve on maybe your transportation board there in your community, maybe your housing authority board, maybe your, you think about all the things that affect people with disabilities, employment, disaster preparedness, all of the things that we know are very important. We want to think about not just your centers and your SILCs. You can take the cream of the crop out of the class and put them on your boards, right? But we also want to think about all the ways that we can impact our community. If you look at the requirements for centers and the description of what is a center for independent living, it talks about equal access internally and in the community at large. Well, how are we accomplishing that? We're often sending our already overstretched staff to go and testify at these meetings. Wouldn't it be better to be on the other side of the table? So as you look at what could be exciting, how could we change our community? I think training leaders in your community to serve in all kinds of roles gives you better access in your community at large. So I'm very excited to turn it over to Bob and to Kimberly and let them tell us more.
Thank you so much, Paula. So as she mentioned, I'm Bob Hand. I'm enjoying retirement. I retired in April, so I get to go on luxury retirement trips like this one right here in between working. But before I get into what I'm going to start with is the history of the Leadership Academy and how we got to where we are and why we got there. But I want to make a couple of generic remarks first. Several people have addressed youth, and I can assure you this is an excellent program for developing leadership with youth. RICV, Resource for Independent Central Valley, their courses, their classes are primarily for adults, but we have a very strong youth program there, and some of our youth participate in every one of our classes. And I don't want to take Kimberly's thunder away, but when she talks about it, they have an extremely strong youth program and have leadership academies for them. So you'll see that. The other thing I think is important about application is this is not a generic how to be a leader training. We talk about some things within it, how you dress and how you interact. But this is a very, very specific program. What do you need to do to be a successful board member on a nonprofit board or successful on a government council? Very specific. Both this training and the manual you have will teach you exactly how you can start your program and teach people with that. So to me, one of the big differences, again, it's not kind of a generic thing to talk about being a good leader and then you can go back and figure out how in the world would I ever apply that. But rather, if you want to follow this formula, it has exactly how you do it. And it is very focused. This is about boards and government councils, not other kinds of general leadership. But the other important thing, we all talk about having members represented on the SILC, on the Disability Advisory Commission, but that's only a small part of it. We want people on the City Parks Committee. We want people on the City Streets Committee. We want people on Public Utilities Advisory Group, because people with disabilities have a right to a say in all of that. Let's not restrict ourselves to just disability programs, and the same with nonprofits. We have a right to have that voice in all of the nonprofits who are providing services. So that you're going to see that that's going to come out as we move along. So this was actually your page. Okay, So this is a little bit about the overview. Effective community leaders in both CIL and SILC boards. At RICV, and I've left there, so obviously there's a little bit of change, but when I was there, 4 out of the last 5 board members we recruited came from our Community Leadership Academy. You put on the academies, you see who's interested, who's dynamic, who's catching on to what a board's supposed to do, and you recruit them onto your board. This gives a framework and skills for developing capable community leaders, and we're going to talk about that capability issue. We're going to talk about the benefits and the advantages of implementing it, the steps to implement it very specifically. Okay, so, and I'm going to say one other thing here that, well, 2 other things. One is, when you put on a Community Leadership Academy, when I do one of the first things I always say is you get out of it what you put into it. Now here we have several activities. We're going to have group discussions. We're going to have breakout sessions. And it's not that, as they know, I can't sit up here and talk all day long. I can do that. But when you guys get the chance to interact and give your experiences and ask questions, that's when you're going to get the most out of it. I also have a little disclaimer. We're going to talk about some of the legal issues of being on a board. We're going to talk about some finances. I think I can safely say that neither Kimberly or I are an attorney or a CPA, so don't take anything we say as legal advice, even though we're going to talk about legal issues of it. And the other thing I'll say is, if you're interested in starting one of these, when you get back, if you're working on actively getting it started and you have your first course within the first 4 to 6 months, you will be successful. If you get back and you say, wow, this is great, we really want to do it, but I've got all these other things I need to do first, so I'm going to put it off and do it later, almost certainly you will never have a leadership academy. And I say that from experience because I've trained throughout California and many places. Besides that, the ones who get on it and get it going are successful. The ones who say, oh, first I need to deal with this, and then I need to deal with this, and I'm going to start it later, it never gets done. So keep that in mind. You have a question back there?
When you talk about that timeline, I definitely see the point. What we're looking at is having a rather involved recruitment process because we're in a very rural area. When you say 4 to 6 months to actually have the academy, would recruitment be enough to get us on that timeline moving, or do you think we need to move up our recruitment efforts and actually hold the academy within that timeline?
Well, that's kind of a generic statement, so obviously in each place you have to work on it. But I guess my point being is, if you delay the process of starting and actively working, you're not likely to ever start one. If you're working on it and it takes you 7 months instead of 6 months or something, it'll still work as long as it's there and you're going for it. So let's look at a little bit of the history of it. It was about 6 years ago. Paula, were you president of the board then? Paula was president of our board. You can imagine the difficulties I had then. And the way we did our strategic plan is our board set general goals, and then the staff would go back and develop measurable objectives. And so this wonderful board set this goal: people with disabilities will be full participants in our communities. Not this building will become accessible, not they'll be able to participate in this program, but rather full participants. And we're looking at that and going, what are we going to do to accomplish that? And one of the things we looked at in our communities was all of the groups making decisions, the other nonprofits who were providing services to our people, the government entities. none of them had the IL philosophy within their decision-making process. And so what happens is they make decisions without thinking about accessibility or anything, and then we go and protest it. And we thought, well, what if we were making those decisions with them? This is some statistics. About 57 million of the 324 million residents in the U.S. on the last census, and this may be a little older, but self-reported as having a disability, and yet less than 1/2% of federal government employees in management reported having a disability. And if you look at your city councils, you look at your counties, the state, how many of those people have disabilities, and take that into consideration. So that's what we wanted to start looking at. You have to have a mic. Do we want to do it this way?
So it becomes difficult to measure the participation rate of individuals with disabilities, since you don't have to report you have a disability, and some disabilities are not observable by others. So I think that we need to be careful when we're talking about this, because self-disclosure can be very stigmatizing for some individuals. So I just,
No,
in the
that's
back of my mind.
Perfectly legitimate point. There may well be more people with disabilities, but I think we can say, for whatever reason, accessibility and inclusion are generally not being considered in a lot of the community decisions. So that's what we're after. So we looked at that and we said, great, then we have lots of contacts in our community. We'll get a lot of our people with disabilities in these positions. We'll help them get appointed to boards, or we'll help them get on these councils. And so we asked a lot of our constituents to do that, and a lot of them said, well, no, we don't want to do it because we don't feel like we know what we're doing if we get on there. And we talked to some of them who were on some, and they said, you know what we are is we're kind of the token person with a disability, because we don't feel like we really know what we're doing and how to have an effect on it. So what we decided then was, well, we can't just throw people out there and get them on these boards. We need to prepare them. And so we started ourselves, and basically I, with a few of my staff, designed this academy to teach people. It was just to be at RICV. We're just going to have our local community academy to both encourage people to start taking that leadership and to teach some of the main things: parliamentary procedures, leadership skills, open meeting laws, and et cetera. I often tell people our secret plan is to take over the Central Valley of California, because we're going to have all of our graduates in all of these leadership positions. And by the way, we talked about some other things. We talked about getting people elected to some of the elected positions, but that's much more difficult. And as a nonprofit, if you get involved directly in elections, you can have problems. So we decided advisory boards and nonprofit boards was the way to go for this. Quite frankly, it was so successful that we were asked to design the Train the Trainer program and put it elsewhere. When we were telling people statewide what was going on, they were so impressed with it that we were strongly encouraged to develop this. The governor's appointment office in California calls me up when they're trying to find appointments from our area. They tell me that if any of our graduates apply, they will give them a priority because they know they're going to understand what they're doing. And the same with our city and county. It's sought after as leaders. When I came in, RICV was under probation and Department of Rehab was going to close it. And part of it, obviously there were a lot of things to solve, part of it was nobody wanted to have anything to do with them because they just weren't doing the right stuff. Now, we're seen as the people who train leaders. And I have to tell you, it's not just people with disabilities. Now we get applicants from the university, we get applicants from other nonprofit boards. The local foundation is after us to do training there. This really changes how an independent living center is seen, from this nice little place that helps people with disabilities to a place that trains the leaders in their community. So this program will give you the knowledge to do all of that. And I have to thank ILRU for this. They've purchased the trainer's manual. That's $130 plus tax and shipping and all of that. So each of you are getting that free. That's a very valuable tool. We're going to be going not exactly through it. You won't see us stepping through each page and saying, here's what this page says and here's what this page says. But we will go through the sections of it. I do want to just start off by saying sort of generically, it's color-coded, and the first tabs are all about each section and how you train them. And it says what materials you need to have. It says what the purpose of that particular part of it is, some of the goals you should be meeting within that, step by step what you do. Then the sort of bluish tabs are things that just as a trainer you might need. There's a sample press release, there's a certificate of graduation, there's other things like that. And then the last section in the orange colored, that's the student manual. When we train, and I think when you guys train, you use the student manual. So each student wouldn't have the trainer's manual, but if you choose to do it, each of them would have the student manual. But you have that within that section. I need to tell you this is copyrighted by RICV, not by me. I don't own it, they own it. So it is a copyrighted book, but anytime you want any of the materials, you can use it. But some things like the certificates and that sort of stuff, certainly you're welcome to copy and use if you want to do that. But the manual, you can take that and you can actually step through that. That's going to tell you how you start a program right there. To me, this, yes, in the back.
When we choose to implement this program, are we permitted to copy the student manual section, or do we need to purchase those individually for students who participate?
Yeah, you would have to purchase them individually. They cost, I think, $15 again, plus shipping. Now, you don't have to have those. You can run this without those. They have things like sample articles and bylaws and things, and we're going to go through that. You can just use your own articles and use your own bylaws and do that. But I can't give you permission to copy because I don't own it. RICV owns it. You know, if you have 10 people and you buy one for each of them, it's going to cost you about $200. So it's not like it's a huge expense to do that. But as I said, you can run a program without doing that. Obviously, the first ones we ran, we didn't have those. We just copied articles and bylaws and things. Yes.
I was wondering, and maybe I'm jumping the gun, but are you going to get into how you attract people to this, how you run it as far as time of day and, you know, the frequency of the trainings? Because we have a hard enough time getting people on our advisory committees and things. I mean,
we're going to talk about all of that.
Oh, good.
And anything we don't talk about, you ask us about as we go along. But all of that's a part of it, because you're right. If you can't get people there, it doesn't make much difference. But we'll talk about how you go about doing that. This will, having the academy will improve the knowledge and skill level of your own board members. Not only does RICV recruit board members, but many of our board members go through the program if they hadn't gone through it before. So most of them have been trained through this program. It greatly improves your ability to recruit board members with disabilities. We all know the problem. You have an independent living center, you have to have at least 51% of your board with significant disabilities, so you kind of pick people with disabilities. And you know, I do a lot of board training. Besides the Leadership Academy, I'll go do training for people's boards. Board members don't know what they're doing most of the time. It doesn't mean they're not smart. I mean, we have on at RICV, you know, a vice president of a bank, we have an attorney, they have professional people, but they have no clue what a board of a nonprofit's supposed to do. And if they don't know, and they're providing the leadership, it's going to cause you tremendous problems, or the same with a SILC. This will teach them exactly how to go about being a board member. It'll enhance your center's reputation in the community, as I said, both statewide and locally. RICV now is known as providing outstanding services, but also as a place you can go to become a leader in the community, a place where nonprofits can send their board members, where others in the community who want to do that can get the training to become leaders. And let me make sure I see where I'm at. It'll make your community a better place. And of course, that was the point of all of this when we started. Get people with disabilities in decision-making positions in your community. And then when they're making those decisions, they don't do it without that perspective, and then you have to go tell them they did it wrong. Let's help them make the right decisions right from the start, and that's what this is about. And as I mentioned, all kinds of nonprofit boards and government boards, not just disability-related ones, because we all know every single thing the government does affects you. Every nonprofit that's providing some kind of services, I don't care if it's meals or employment or anything, as much as it affects anybody else, it affects people with disabilities, and we should be there helping their boards make their decisions about what they're going to do. Okay, this academy is designed to run between 15 and 18 hours. The actual manual was printed up when we were running it for 15 hours. Some of the feedback we got said people needed more time to practice parliamentary procedures, and we got our university, Fresno State University, to give course credit for it. So we went to 18 hours to do that. But we'll talk about that. There can be a lot of leeway. To me, the best idea is to do it about 3 hours a day, 1 day a week for 5 or 6 weeks. Now, some of them have ran like 2 days in a row, you know, 2 8-hour days or something, and you can do that. The advantage of this one is we encourage people when they're going through the course to go to boards, to go to council meetings and watch them and see. I mean, even if the board is doing everything wrong that they observe, they're going to be able to see that and go, oh yeah, now I see why we don't do these things. But if they can also see how they do it. They can see how the open meeting laws run. They can see people make motions and vote on them. And so by spreading it out like that, we give them a little more opportunity to get some experiential things. So, but as I said, you can design it any way you want for your center, sometimes because of transportation issues. I did a training for Oakland for their Disability Advisory Commission, and they brought in some other commissions, and we did it as a 2-day event because they were bringing all of these people in to do it. And then we'll, over the next couple of days, talk about pretty much every detail, step A to step Z, in effect, of what you need to do to start your program. We'll be how do you go about getting funding? How do you recruit people? How do you set it up? All of that. But again, there will be questions, I'm sure, issues we won't address that we strongly encourage you to bring up. And now I'm turning it over to Kimberly.
So I am the very proud executive director of ABLE South Carolina. We are a center for independent living in South Carolina, and we serve 23 counties, which actually makes up half of our state. This program was really easy for me to want to start to get this program at our center. I started to sound like a broken record, telling organizations and businesses, you need to involve people with disabilities in decision making. You need to have them part of your board. You need to have them part of your advisory councils. They would say, well, help me get connected. This is the way that we can help them get connected. And so we started this program, and I'm going to talk with you a little bit about how we started it, and also during lunch today, you're going to actually have ABLE South Carolina on that big screen up there, and you're going to have the opportunity to talk to some of our staff that implement the programs, as well as CLA graduates. So you can learn from their experience what this program has done for them, and ask them what boards they've served on, and what they think their voices is how their voice is making a difference. So we received a training in August of 2014. Bob came to our center, very similar to what we're doing here. I think you spent about 2 or 3 days with us as well. The way that we set it up, I identified a few staff members that need to be at the training, and also invited some funders, possible funders, to be involved so that they can hear about how this program would get started and hear the value of it. So from August 2014, it took us about 6 months to get up and get started. And I'll talk to you a minute about everything that we have had to do in that 6 months. It really went by quickly, but I think 6 months is enough time to get a program like this started. This program is very inexpensive. If you want to provide supplies, we did go ahead and get the student workbooks, but these are very inexpensive. We provide, I should have brought it, a portfolio for all of the participants. So it's like a leather-bound portfolio with a pen and paper, because they're starting their professional leadership when they walk into CLA. So we want to give them some tools to use so that they can be successful. We give them a Robert's Rule of Order. Everyone loves that book. But we give them that. So we give them a few things, but even the supplies to provide the tools to consumers was really inexpensive. So we started our first CLA in February of 2015, and then from there we developed youth CLA groups. We developed different areas within the communities that we serve. So, and we'll talk about that, and you'll get the opportunity to see a few folks this afternoon. We are now on our 7th Community Leadership Academy, and we have had over 40 CLA graduates complete the program. From the 40 graduates, we have 26 graduates in leadership positions and 62 positions in 45 leadership areas. That is 62 positions that people with disabilities are filling on a number of different boards, committees, and councils that otherwise, if they did not go through the training, if they did not get connected, they would not be on those boards. A lot of those the councils and boards that they serve on are non-traditional, so a disability voice was never there. So the impact that these CLA graduates have made is significant. So some of the things that took us 6 months, so what were we doing in that 6 months to get started? We had to secure some funding. Who is going, we needed somebody to pay for these books and somebody to pay for the supplies. I think our first This program actually costs $6,200 a year to implement our center, and we offer several trainings throughout the year, quarterly trainings, and then we also have an online component and an in-person component of the training. We had to create the schedule of what days are going to work best to offer a CLA, how many hours are going to work best. Location, we had to secure a location for the trainings. Staffing needs, you've got to identify the right staff for this program. You need to have staff that understands boards, understands how boards run. You've got to have staff that understands how government and the councils are formed. Someone who can really get out and talk with government officials even, because you'll learn about that in a minute. Experience serving on boards. I think it's really hard to teach how to be involved in a board if you've never done it. So that is something, so both staff members that I have implementing this program, they both serve on a number of boards and committees. You need someone that's really good at recruitment and outreach. How are you going to get your program out there? How are you going to sell it to not only consumers, but also boards? How are you going to do that? So you're going to need that really strong person. We had two people who kind of implement our outreach plan. We have someone who's really creative with graphics, and you all have a brochure in your packet that he created. And then we have someone who is really great with social media and then getting out in the community and recruiting individuals. In our first CLA, I believe we had about 12 participants, and it was really easy to fill up. Now we have a waiting list for our CLA. People call us because they want to be involved in this program. Event planning. There's something that happens after the CLA. You really want to have some sort of ceremony, some sort of graduation event. And you also want to try to invite boards and other organizations to this so that you can make connections, so that these CLA grads may meet someone at the graduation and go serve on their board later on. So we have two ways that we really do outreach for this, and we get the consumers there, and then we get the organizations at the event. And then experience with facilitating trainings. We are, and you'll see this picture up here is Robbie Kopp and Dory Tempio, who is in the chair, and then in the middle, that is a CLA graduate getting her certificate at the graduation ceremony. Dory does our consumer trainings, and she also trains the community members. So and you'll meet her today, her personality is huge, but she was obviously the right person to facilitate and coordinate this program. Robbie Kopp does a lot of our community outreach, and he is involved in advocacy. So he knows all of the advocacy priorities in South Carolina. He knows what the disability community really needs to bring. So he steps in during that component of CLA and also teaches how boards operate. So you'll meet both of them today, so we're really excited. So part of, and I am not doing very good with the slides. Okay. Part of our recruitment was when we did secure funding, our funder came to us and said, I really think I want to get this out there. I really want this to go nationally. We want to pay for some type of commercial, some type of promotional video to be used. So we said, okay, and we took them up on that, and they created this video. And what we ended up doing with this video is we loaded them up on USB drives, and we sent them to almost every single nonprofit in our state through our nonprofit association. So everyone has this video, and everyone learned the importance of having a diverse board and including people with disabilities. So I am going to play the video.
Able South Carolina presents Community Leadership Academy. Learn to lead.
Community Leadership Academy is a learning tool, a bridge from
not knowing anything about
Justin Williams, graduate of Community Leadership Academy.
or knowing very little about how a board works to having the confidence to serve.
The Community Leadership Academy is one of the best leadership training courses I have ever taken.
Charles Hall, graduate of Community Leadership Academy.
And I've taken multiple courses, including a course in high school that was designed to train young people to be leaders. And I honestly have learned more through the Community Leadership Academy than I have any other course I've ever taken as far as being involved in the community.
A lot of the students kind of go from not having a lot of confidence to having a lot more confidence and figuring out that they really could do something to help the community, influence the community.
I've definitely found more of my own voice.
Effie Francis, graduate of Community Leadership Academy.
Since joining so many committees and boards, believe it or not, I was a pretty shy person in my youth. I've only grown even more from that since taking CLA. I went from shyly sitting at a board meeting, taking notes and not really saying anything, to actively participating and voicing my opinion and really being there to represent that very underrepresented voice of youth and disability.
You can be involved in the commissions, the councils, the committees, the nonprofit boards, or you can do what I've done this year and actually gotten involved in government advocacy work and working with the state legislature and the state House Representatives, the state Senate, and other government agencies to be more accessible and allow more inclusion for people with disabilities.
The types of subject matter that the students would encounter is Robert Rules of Order, great speakers, do's and don'ts, dress, professional dress for different types of boards. The leaders and students all had a variety of experiences on different community boards.
If you are in the least bit interested in participating on a board, commission, or committee, CLA is a great opportunity for you to not only find your voice, but help facilitate it in the most professional way possible.
Our CLA graduates are the right choice for any community because they are trained and they're dedicated. They came to this class, wanted to make a difference, and will be able to make a positive difference anywhere they go.
If you happen to be looking for more board members to add greater diversity to your board, commission, or committee, then I don't really think you need to look any further than CLA graduates, because they reflect that great diversity. They reflect all the different kinds of people there are out there who are receiving that professional training and are ready to serve on your board.
The co-director of the State Alliance for Adolescent Sexual Health,
Katie Zinger, New Morning Foundation.
met Effie at an equip function and invited her to be a SASH member because we desperately needed some youth representation. Effie's mere presence at SASH meetings has been a catalyst for change and about how we think about young people's needs. Effie was able to make us stop and ask ourselves questions that we had never considered before. We had never really thought about the necessity of including students with disabilities in this data collection process. And because of her presence at the meeting, we really stopped and considered that. And we've acted on that as well. There's no way that you can be an effective board or an effective committee or do any kind of effective programming for young people without including the voice of young people with disabilities. It's a no-brainer. If the CLA produces young people that are able to interact on a board and really participate the way that Effie participates with the professionalism that she shows, it would be absolutely fantastic to have more people from the CLA on boards like SASH.
We want to be passionate. We want to be involved. We want to have our voice heard. And you want somebody that wants to have their voice heard, then recruit somebody that's a Community Leadership Academy graduate.
For more information, contact ABLE South Carolina, advocacy@able-sc.org, 803-779-5121, 800-681-6805, TTY 803-779-0949. Special thanks to the South Carolina Interagency Office of Disability and Health.
So you can see see how our marketing approach was. It's really getting consumers, because consumers can watch this and get interested and involved in CLA. And also, we added someone who's a CLA participant is on their board, just to speak to the other organizations that may be involved. So you could do something like this. It doesn't have to necessarily be a video, but you can go out into the community and really sell this program and really get people with disabilities on different boards.